Well, it took Michael Skubala a couple of months to find his formula as Lincoln City manager last season after taking charge from Mark Kennedy. But when they got going, boy, did they get going, because in spring they enjoyed a whopping 16 games unbeaten, of which they also enjoyed a 10-game winning streak within 12. Astonishing form from the Imps. They'll be looking to get close to that, or as close as they can do this time around over a full campaign with Michael Skubala at the helm. They've got a talented squad. Can they keep hold of their key players like Lucas Jensen and like Ethan Arahan? And can they gate crash the top six in an increasingly competitive League One? That's what we're going to talk about on this Summer Deep Dive. Yes, welcome along to the latest EFL Debate Summer Deep Dive, one of 72 club by club podcasts we're doing across the EFL between mid-June and mid-July. Already the full shebang uploaded for League Two to YouTube and Spotify, a few for League One as well. So go and check that out. Get yourself subscribed. Once you're done with this one, of course, for now, delighted to be joined by Mr. Jake Tonge from That League One podcast. Good evening, Jake. Thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate your time. Exciting times for Lincoln City, right?
Yes. Well, thank you, Gab, for having me on. I've been literally waiting all summer since we arranged this to hop on and talk about Lincoln. I know we have lots of good chats about Lincoln, but yeah, equally exciting at the moment. I think if anything like that, the last tail end of that season is anything to go by. I think really since Skubala came in November, there's been lots of progression both on the pitch and off the pitch, commercially. Rooting out to America even further in terms of getting somebody who was in sort of in charge of commercial directing and stuff like that with someone who was an MLB side in America. So yeah, lots going on the pitch. Obviously, some stuff going on off it as well in terms of sales and incoming transfers and stuff like that, which we're expecting in the coming weeks. But no, it's a really exciting period to be a Lincoln fan. I'd probably say I'm more as equally as excited as this season as I was almost every year under Danny Cowley. So I'm the thought of going to watch Lincoln in just over 2 weeks in Spain against Preston North End in Murcia is really, really exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Skubala can whip us up this year.
Absolutely. I'm sure he will whip up something quite special, because Skubala, it takes a lot to connect with Lincoln City fans, quite like Danny and Nicky Cowley did in probably such a successful era in that sort of late 2010s. Michael Skubala just seems like such a down-to-earth human being, and very sort of likable, sort of unassuming bloke. But his tactical ideas seem very advanced, and especially in possession, although he's been able to organise Lincoln City superbly as well. But for me, what's really stood out about his management of the Imps, Jake, I don't know about you, is his ability to get his ideas across in season, because that is the hardest thing. I've come across some amazing coaches, amazing managers who I rate really, really highly. Sometimes they can struggle to get their ideas across and make their team effective with these new ideas after an in-season appointment. It's really tough. Skubala's done that so far, which for me is an extremely encouraging sign.
Yeah, you touched on Skubala being a good bloke. First and foremost, you're absolutely right, Gab. I remember Blackpool away, which was the end of that 4-game losing streak that we had in the middle of just over the festive period. And before the game, he spent half an hour when he got off the team bus talking to supporters as to why the club were where they were in terms of losing games. Lots of fans were not enjoying the football at the time, as you can imagine, losing 4 games on the spin. And having the interactions that I've had with him, like you say, very down to earth. It's very, very stereotypical to say that a manager speaks well. But Skubala, if you listen to him speak, you quite like listening to him speak, because he speaks a lot of sense, and like I say, always friendly, always interactive with the supporters. And that was something that we spoke about in terms of Michael Appleton. He really didn't sort of catch fire when he was at Lincoln in terms of that aspect of the job, like Danny and Nicky had done in terms of bringing the city and the football club together again. And I think under Skubala and that run at the end of the season, and his humility and what he's brought to the club, has a similar sort of feel to how we were under Cowley, like I alluded. But in terms of getting his style across mid-season, I think it was difficult for a start because when he first came in, it was pretty much Saturday, Tuesday until we had a gap for the FA Cup break, and that's when you had the significant change of form in terms of the unbeaten run started from that break after that Blackpool game, which I spoke about. So, yeah, really impressive to come in to a group of players that under Mark Kennedy weren't all that exciting to watch going forward. We've always had a sound base in League One. I thought we've never looked like we're going to ship loads of goals. We have one of the best defences in League One in 22-23. So it was more of a case of just trying to add that attacking output into it, and obviously with additions through Jack Moylan, who stepped up. Joe Taylor obviously was a stroke of genius as well. He was able to implement that, and that's what makes all us Lincoln fans really excited going into next year, because if he can do that in mid-season when he's got, we saw what he did with a 2-week break from Blackpool to Wickham. What's he going to do with a 3-month break where he's being able to, in charge of recruitment, bringing in new players? He's got loads of time on the training ground. It's his first full pre-season in charge as a manager. That will come with its challenges. I think John Mousinho, this time last year would have been hit with the same sort of criticism. So yeah, look, it's exciting, and hopefully he can. Like I said, if we had that in 2 weeks, we're just trying to think about what on earth he could do in 3 months, and we're thinking we could well be on for one hell of a season if it goes anything like it did. Obviously, it might not, but the signs are pointing quite positively at the moment.
They certainly are. In terms of the running of the club, Clive Nates, I think, takes a lot of credit for the trajectory that the club's on, and there's some really important people sort of behind the scenes at the club as well.
Yeah, Clive Nates is some bloke, Gab. He is. He took over from Bob Dorian when the club were languishing in the conference and had never finished above 13th, and came in and invested some money, got Danny and Nicky Cowley in, and hasn't looked back since there. Obviously, it's difficult to do it all by yourself. Obviously, whilst Clive is an extremely wealthy individual, he's had to have investment come in, and luckily in the last sort of 3 or 4 years, we've had the Jabara family from America, and they've brought in the likes of Landon Donovan as a strategic advisor, and they've brought in, I think it's Ron Fowler, this fella who's sort of done a lot of commercial with American football and baseball and stuff like that. So, whilst Clive is a fantastic bloke, and what you really would say is that if anyone wants to invest in Lincoln City, they need to be exactly like Clive. Clive is very protective. He is very. He wants to make sure, he wants to sound you out. So I think before the Jabara's got a single seat on the board, they now have 2 or 3. He spent 2 years sounding them out, going over to America, speaking to them, getting character references, and but yeah, Clive Nates, like you mentioned, is a very good owner, and I think you'd struggle to find many better people in charge of a football club in the entirety of the EFL.
Certainly would. What really appeals to me is I can think of 1 or 2 clubs who have had the achievement of getting to League One, but then things might have plateaued for them, maybe because of partly low gates and stuff like that, but also maybe not being particularly outward looking in terms of commercial opportunities or for ways of seeking outside investment, because without really having a plan or a vision to really sell to investors, and that's where things can stagnate. Whereas what I really like about Lincoln City is that they're quite an outward-looking club. No, they don't hand out stakes in the club to any old, sort of, Nigerian prince sort of thing. But it's always looking at new possibilities and opportunities, and it leans into change. And I think that's what gives Lincoln City an exciting future.
Yeah, and I think you've mentioned there, Clive has to take a lot of credit. I also think you've got to give a humongous amount of credit to the Chief Exec, Liam Scully. Since coming in from Doncaster, he has implemented so much change from a positive point of view, whether that be the fan zone behind the goal, Gab, which I know you were able to go and spend some time in before the Stevenage game last season. That sort of thing was an invention of Liam Scully. He's been really good in terms of obviously commercial and getting us interest from abroad and stuff like that. And then couple that, you mentioned employing good people, Jez George as well as a director of football. Whilst perhaps he might have mixed reviews down in Cambridge, he's certainly got glowing reviews from a lot of Lincoln City supporters with his forward-thinking recruitment, and we'll come on to to that later. But Lincoln are one of the clubs that first started recruiting from Ireland on a consistent basis. This season, we're looking at Scandinavia and other places, which is really, really exciting. And what I really like is they're forward-thinking, outwards people, and they're always ahead of the curve. And I mean, they recruited an analyst, Gab, from New Zealand. When one
I
of them
love that. I love that you can be aware of analysts in, and it's that sort of being like it's acquiring that knowledge. Do you know what I mean? On a sort of global scale, I find that so impressive for a modestly sized League One club.
Yeah, and I've listened to talks with Jez, and I've met him myself, and he's very much, if you outgrow the club, and this is whether you're staff, whether you're support staff, whether you're you're a player for the club, or whoever you are in your role, if you outgrow Lincoln, then absolutely you are more than welcome to feel free to go on and move on. We've had members of staff go up and work in the Premier League at Leicester, bigger clubs like Derby, who are in the same division.
It's what you want, Jake, isn't it?
Exactly, and I think when new staff come in that they've headhunted, they're told, look, this is how we work, this is how you need to work. And the good thing is, because they've done their research and the character references, the people come in and already know how Lincoln want them to work, and they're always able to do that. And yeah, just off the pitch and that whole sort of support team around Skubala and stuff like it. It's a bit of a shame that we've lost Chris Cohen to Stoke. He was a really big, he had a really big impact coming in from around Tom Shaw's interim period. But off the pitch, it's you just trust them. You trust all of them. You trust Clive, Harvey, Liam, Jez, Michael. The club's in a really good position at the moment, and you can see why a lot of people will expect Lincoln to progress and potentially look at climbing up the leagues. And the good thing about it, Gab, is it's sustainable. The club are living within the means, and they're not throwing money at it like other clubs are.
What an inspiration, a shining example to other similarly sized clubs of how you can make progress within the EFL without spending the earth. So absolutely all credit to everybody involved in any capacity with Lincoln City. So I want to come to the squad then, Jake, and I guess we'll start with the goalkeeping situation and Lucas Jensen. And unfortunately, I've got to press the "you were right" button because when he signed from Accrington Stanley, this time last year, I was like, it's had a bit of an up and down season for the Reds. Not sure for a playoff aspiring side he's the right kind of signing. And then you were like, well, he's got this big build, and you were actually spot on about him. So fair play to you.
Yeah. Wow, Lucas Jensen, as not as good as a bloke as you'll find, Gab, as well. I mean, it's a common thread from footballers that Lincoln have recruited in years, but following Carl Rushworth was an extremely difficult task, as you saw how good Carl Rushworth was for Lincoln last year. And you'd say over the last 5 years, we've had some really good goalkeepers in the likes of Bursick, Palmer, and Rushworth. And it was difficult for Lucas because he's been our first permanent keeper since Josh Vickers, which was sort of the League Two title winning team. And he came in and he looked shaky for a start. I did have my doubts at the start of the season. There was one moment in particular in the Oxford game at home where it was getting pretty foggy, but if you look back at the second goal, he basically chucked it into his own net. But he's 24, he's a young keeper. These things are going to happen. And from that moment where he made a mistake, he owned up to it. He went and apologised to his teammates, and he didn't really look back. He made lots of key saves in big moments. I think of the Bristol Rovers game where we won 5-0. Bristol Rovers could have scored about 10. Likewise, we could have done as well. But Lucas Jensen was big and strong, and I think, and I know from Lincoln, I get the mick taken out of me on the podcast because we're very house proud and we're very, we're all very.
You're very Ben House proud.
We're very Ben House. Yeah, that's a good one, Gav. Actually, I'm going to start using that this season. Yeah, I don't think there was a better performing goalkeeper in League One last season than Lucas Jensen. I think you look at the main stat, which was goals prevented. He's out in front by some considerable distance. Conceded one of the fewest amount of goals last season as well, and just a phenomenal keeper. And one that we're very, very fortunate to have, because I think if we don't get promoted at the end of this season, Lucas will be making the step up, and we'll have to be on the hunt again. But that's why you bring in the likes of Jamie Partington, who I thought your next question would be about, and then you bring one through your own ranks in Sam Long as well.
Yeah, absolutely. How's that competition shaping up between Partington and Long? Because it's would you say that both those goalkeepers are a bit too established in their careers or developed in their careers for either of them to accept being third choice, let alone sort of second choice?
I think with Sam, because he's one of our own, and it's sort of, I don't know what it is when you have a player that comes through the academy. You're like, oh, he's just come back from a really successful loan gap. It was out on loan at Falkirk in the Scottish leagues. They went unbeaten, and they didn't concede many goals. I think that the job for Sam now is to try and step up again into a top end national league, or perhaps even a League Two loan. We had quite a success in loaning to League Two last season. We might be looking to do the same. Jamie, I imagine, is coming in to be the number two. Having been a number two at Cheltenham, he's spent time at Mansfield and Grimsby. He's got a little bit more senior EFL experience, so I think they'll be happy to keep him around. And if he can push Lucas all the way this coming season, when Lucas inevitably moves on, or if we step up and Lucas moves on anyway, he could potentially just be someone to come in and sort of, it sounds really nasty, but fill a gap until Sam Long is ready to be that. But, it all depends on what we do with Sam. I imagine we'd look to loan him to, I think League Two is quite a stretch, because you don't see many come from League Two down to young players go from League One to League Two.
Sometimes they work with Freddie Draper, though.
Yeah, well, this is it. Well, I watched you chat with Simon, the Walsall fan, and they could potentially do with a keeper, with Jackson Smith not signing the contract and Owen Evans leaving as well. So potentially there's an opportunity for Sam to go in there. Whether he's a playoff chasing League Two keeper, we'll have to wait and see. But I don't think there's any harm in giving him the run. But to answer your question, I think Jamie will be the number two this year, with Sam sort of taking that loan spell out again.
So it was the Scottish League One that he helped Falkirk win. So I think if we say Scottish Championship would be about his level, then Scottish Championship to League Two is that a massive. I don't know. I think League Two probably is reasonable, but maybe you're right. Maybe it's more likely to be sort of top end National League. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure on that one, but I definitely feel that. I'm not sure Sam Long would be happy to be to not get any games next season, because I imagine that he'd feel like he'd want to get some. So I think a loan, one way or the other, would be the future for him for this season. So centre backs then. I guess your meat and potato centre backs, sort of Adam Jackson and Pordy O'Connor, and you'd be expecting to rely on them this season.
Yeah, they were quite reliable last year. Jacko, until he got injured, was probably up there for player of the season, playing that middle centre back role, heading everything, blocking everything. I think if you speak to Ipswich fans, they still have nightmares from when we beat them 1-0 at Portman Road in 22-23 for the amount of times he got in front of shots that day. Not the quickest, but very intelligent. I think it's always important to keep these experienced heads around, because whilst Lincoln go down this younger route model quite a lot, it is really important to keep someone with a lot of experience at in those defensive positions. And Adam Jackson is certainly one of those. Pordy O'Connor's a little bit different. Obviously, he's only 25, I think. He had a bit of an up and down year last year. It looked like he was potentially the problem in terms of build-up play when Skubala first came in. He was taking a few too many touches. When you'd think, right, release the ball, he'd keep onto it a little bit longer. Oh, right, let's play the quick ball into Joe Taylor or around the corner into House or to Irahan and let's move forward. He perhaps kept it a little bit too much.
Okay.
But he really made me eat my words toward the end of the season, because he was fantastic in that run, and it just shows you what confidence does. Maybe he was playing not with no confidence, but those are two that I think you can certainly rely on in the centre back position, and then you sprinkle the likes of Sean Rowan in as well, who is probably going to either play that left centre back or the left back role, given dependent on what formation we play, and then we expect Lewis Monsma as well to sign up for the 24-25 season as well. So that looks like 4 centre backs. Whether we play a 4, if we play a 4, we've probably got enough. If we're going to play a 3, you'd probably want 1 or 2 more, given we released Aoma. Hayden Can's come back from Ireland and is likely going to get released. Zach Bradshaw can play left-sided centre-back, but has played a lot in midfield out at Dundalk. So lots of options, but yeah, meat and potato pie centre-halves, Gav. I quite like that one.
I'm actually thinking that if we're holding Lincoln City to top 6 standards, which again, it's kind of a compliment to you that we're having that conversation, but that's kind of where we are. I'm thinking for a back 3, I would say start Adam Jackson or Porgy O'Connor, because I think that if you want to progress the ball the way Michael Skubala likes to, and we saw you did that brilliantly last season, I think you probably need your wide centre backs if it's a back 3, or one of your centre backs if it's a back 4, to be really good at progressing the ball. Now we know Lewis Monsma can do that, so I'm thinking one more centre half that's a bit more of a ball player, and you got Sean Rowan and Hayden Can as your other options.
Would have been nice if we could have got Alex Mitchell, wouldn't it? Because he was amazing here on loan last season, but he's obviously gone to...
You say that. I mean, Alex Mitchell is a battler, but again, I actually think if we're looking at the silver lining of him going, I think you can probably get a better ball player than Alex Mitchell.
I thought he was. I actually thought he was quite decent at progressing the ball quickly into midfield. Especially during that winning run.
He's not a ball playing specialist, though, Jake.
No, not like Lewis. But then the caveat with Lewis is, Gab, he's coming off the back of back-to-back ACL injuries, where and that is a risk within itself. Hence why the club have only offered him what is believed to be a short-term contract until January to sort of have a look and see if he can recover, because now he's 24 or 25. He's had 3 ACLs in his career already. That's quite a lot for a defender. And whilst he can play the sexy pings, and we saw Lewis Monsma probably at his best in the 2021 season, that first half of it, he was electric, and wow, he was that good. I would perhaps be a touch skeptical whether we see that straight away. So I would agree. I'd probably look to bring in a young ball playing centre half, like you say. Maybe look at Ireland, or whether that's somewhere in Scandinavia that we're looking to recruit for. But I think we need one with Jackson being that, or O'Connor playing that middle centre half, and then Sean playing out on the left hand side. I think if you've got Sean, O'Connor, or Jackson, and then another ball playing centre back, you've got a pretty good back 3 there.
Can we talk a bit more about Hayden Can and whether you think he's got a chance, if he has a good pre-season, of breaking into the conversation?
Yeah, it's difficult. He's been at Drogheda on loan this season. He was previously at Peterborough Sports in the first half of 23-24, where he had some really glowing reviews. He was really good, but that is National League North, and it is quite a jump up to League One. He's gone on loan to Drogheda, and it's not quite worked. I think the only moment that he's perhaps had whilst he's out there is scoring a winner in the 94th minute in. It's called the Louth Derby, which is really strange because Louth is like a little small town near Lincoln. We were nearly around that neck of the woods when we went for that Italian, Gab. Which is the Drogheda Dundalk Derby. He scored a winner in that, but from looking at the replies to the tweet saying that Drogheda, that we've recalled him, it looks like they were quite happy for him to come back. The rumor at the moment is that he's going to be released and then signed for Dundalk on a permanent contract. It's harsh because he is a Lincoln lad and he's one of our own, and he's literally from a stone's throw from the ground. Which is a shame to say that he'll get released, but he's just not really stepped up to quite as quickly, and he's 20 now. It's wondering, when you compare him to the other lad that we had on loan at Drogheda this season, which we're definitely going to come on to, who's 17, 18, in Ocean Gallagher, then there's sort of a level in terms of you're 17, 18, you're playing really well. You're at 20 and you're not quite, in a position that we're quite stacked in. So,
Sure.
unfortunately, I think it's the end of the road for Hayden at Lincoln. But hopefully, he can go on and have a professional career elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Best of luck to him, whether that's at Lincoln City or elsewhere. But let's take the scenario for the purposes of this that that you're right about that Hayden Can does find pastures new. That only leaves Lincoln with 4 centre backs, and that's in the event that you play a back 3, because if you play a back 4, obviously Sean Rowan becomes a left back rather than a left centre back. So I'm actually thinking you might end up needing a couple of centre backs, or at least a couple of players who could play centre back, and maybe one who's a centre back who could play at right back or something along those lines.
I think you're probably right. I think it's an area that perhaps what we'll do is use the low market in terms of our defenders. We used the low market quite well last year with Alex Mitchell coming in quite late, just before that with Sheffield United, and then Jack Burrows as well, who came in on loan from Coventry. So I imagine that probably be something that we'll maybe look to buy one centre half that we know that we can try to develop. But also, I wouldn't be surprised to see Lincoln delve into the loan market just for added stocking filler, just a little bit of insurance in case Lewis's ACL, in case Lewis's leg goes again.
Yeah, I mean, because again, if Lewis's ACL goes, then you're left with Jackson and O'Connor, and we've already said that we're not 100% sure about them playing simultaneously, even if they can both be really effective. So yeah, I do think that it's worth not being too complacent about the centre back position. But then right wing back, you've lost Lasse Sorensen. I mean, what a loss.
I'm gonna cry, Gab. It makes me upset. Carry on, Gab. I'm gonna try and just not cry while you talk about it.
Oh no, that's all I was.
Oh, that's what you have to say. Yeah, no, we lost Lass. Look, it was really difficult. Lass came to Lincoln. I'm sure you can remember. Gabby came from Stoke. We paid a fee for him as a holding midfielder. Didn't really work out under Appleton. He got cast aside, and then under Kennedy, he got last aside. You're full of these Lincoln puns, aren't you, Gab? I'm liking it. Yeah. He got cast aside by Appleton or last aside, and then Kennedy sort of converted him into this right wing back, and he didn't look back because I think for half of the season in 22-23, and then all of last year, I know we did an EFL debate on right wing backs, didn't we? Around the Christmas time. And we put him second, but I think if you'd have waited the whole season to maybe do it, I think you'd maybe look to put him first. He was that good in terms of his output. 12 goal contributions from wing back. It
was the game against Charlton that was the big one, wasn't it?
Oh, 11 shots in one game. He was absolutely electric. But the club were in a position where Lass was entering the last year of his contract. He was probably, in terms of how much money we could get for him, this summer was probably the most we could probably get for him, and he only had 1 year left on his contract. And we made the mistake of Regan Poole, not selling Regan Poole and letting him go on a free, and to get a fee of rumoured to be around £500,000 for Sorensen with 1 year left on his deal. I know it's a bit frustrating that we sold him to Huddersfield in our own league, because I fully believe, and I'm sure you will, Gab, that he could make the step up to the Championship.
Yeah,
but Huddersfield
that would have been nicer to not have him playing in the same league.
Yeah, I agree, but Huddersfield is such a step up from Lincoln in terms of finances, in terms of facilities. They're not one of those clubs. Normally, you have some clubs that come down from the Championship that are an absolute basket case. We had a couple, like Wigan and teams like and Reading.
Well, do you know what, Jake? I wouldn't have agreed with you if they still had, I don't know, Phil Hodgkinson or Dean Hoyle as owner, but because they've got Kevin Nagle as owner, who's put a lot of money into the club. They invested big in January. They've got Michael Duff there. I'm sure they're going to have a big budget for League One. So yeah, you're probably right.
And it's a really good project. It's a really good project. And to be honest, Huddersfield have given us quite a lot of money in recent years with Danny and Nicky Cowley, with Harry Toffolo going there as well. So look, it's a good move for Lass. He's on a long-term contract. He'll be making maybe double what he was earning at Lincoln, and there's a real ambition to get promoted out of the league from Huddersfield, and he's probably more likely to achieve it there than he is here, unfortunately.
Now, I'm asking you to be a bit of a Fabrizio Romano here, Jake. Do you know if he had a sell-on percentage or anything like that with the
What Lass? I don't. It would be smart
yeah,
because he's still only 23, 24.
yeah,
So
exactly.
it would be. I would imagine the club would have said, "Look, we did it for the Harry Toffolo deal. So when Toff went to Forest, we then benefited again financially. So I imagine if Lass has an unbelievable season with Huddersfield, they somehow don't get promoted, and then all of a sudden there are Championship clubs coming in for millions of pounds for him, which could easily happen in a year's
Yeah,
time. Then I imagine Lincoln will be protected. We've been very good under Jez George and Liam Scully at retaining interest in players that have left. Even the likes of Charlie, I know he's not right back, but Charlie Kendall, we sold him to Woking, but we haven't retained a future interest because we believe one day he could yet still fire off. And if Woking sell him for a couple £100,000 or whatever into the Football League, we feel like we could benefit. So,
right.
yeah, I'd be surprised if the club didn't have one clause like that.
Fingers crossed for that. Talk to me about where I'm not expecting him to be the first choice right back necessarily, or expect certainly starting pre-season. We don't know how things develop, but you'll bring in another right wing back, I'm sure. But talk to me about where Jay Ben's at with his development.
Yeah, so Jay, he's had a couple of loan spells away from Lincoln since signing from Halifax. He went out to Ireland to be at Bohemians, and that didn't quite work out. So at the start of this season, we actually played him in the Carabao Cup win over Notts County, and then he went out on loan to Solihull, where I mean you'll know, Gab, because it's all your neck of the woods, that they've had a really good season. They got to a playoff final, they got to the FA Trophy final. Unfortunately, they lost both of those. But in terms of playing a lot of games, he did have a spell injured in terms of he was on the sidelines for a spell. But I'm pretty sure in saying that I've listened to a few Solihull fans. Their player of the year last year was their right back or their right wing back, and Jay's been able to keep him out of the team all season when he's been fit. So it looks like he's had a really productive spell at Solihull. And whilst I agree, I wouldn't expect him to come in and be first choice. I'd expect him certainly to stick around this season, perhaps playing the EFL Trophy. Perhaps if we get an injury to the first choice right wing back, which hopefully we're going to spend a bit of money on, then yeah, hopefully he can come in and do a job, because he's also won early 20s where he's approaching maybe last chance saloon at Lincoln. So fingers crossed for Jay, because he's a really athletic wing back who certainly can whip a ball in.
Yeah, I mean, you say last chance saloon. That I see where you're coming from, but you could also argue he hasn't actually had that many chances in the first place. So
Yeah.
hopefully he can have a big preseason, really stake a claim, so that he can compete strongly with whoever else comes in for that right wing back spot, and maybe he could be a bit of a wild card. But I really want to talk to you about this midfield area, because if I read out the list of names you got there, you got Ethan Hamilton and Ethan Arajon, the Ethan compound. You've got, I know, you got Jack Moylan there, who was brilliant towards the end of last season. You got Tom Bayliss, poached from Shrewsbury.
Yep.
You got Conor McGrandles, who was Player of the Year arguably in 2021. He's coming back, and you got Oisin Gallagher, who's a bright young talent as well. So that's 6 players there.
Yeah.
And any of whom you wouldn't be upset if they were starting. So what a position to be in.
Yeah, I mean, we're incredibly fortunate in terms of, you talk about the Ethan compound, just wow. Ethan Hamilton again, like Jackson, was in the run for Player of the Year until he got injured, and he got injured away at Burton, which was coincided with the good run. But he was fantastic last season in terms of that 8 driving forward. Was captain, I think, a couple of times as well. So that shows you that the level of trust that Lincoln certainly have in him. And then you put him next to just what a midfielder Ethan Arahan is. Like, we've purred over him so many times, Gab. I remember coming on and talking to you straight after his debut away at Accrington. And I just went, wow, what a player. And he's just grown. And for Lincoln to have the security on Ethan is the exciting thing, because he is a fantastic footballer at what he does. He's a great 6 who's good at retaining the ball and keeping it simple and winning the ball back and preventing counter-attacks and dangerous situations. and the club are well protected. He's got 3 years left on his contract. He's 23. He's played a load of first team games. He's played a year and a half at Lincoln. He's played a couple of years in the first team of St Mirren. There is significant interest, and it would be crass not to mention that there will be bids for Ethan this summer. However, the club aren't in it. The club are not in a position where we have to sell him to make up money, or we don't have to sell him. But if a club wants to pay us £2.5-3 million for him for the potential that he's got, then I think the club would say, do you know what, Ethan, we would love to keep you, but if you have to move on, then so be it. We're going to be looked after financially. You'd like to think also that the club would put in a sell-on clause, because that boy is going to play 1 year in the Championship or that equivalent, that level, I'd have thought, and then go. He's got the potential to go and play up again. I think, Gab. I mean, you'll know. I know HC, the scout, believes that as well. In terms of, he wouldn't be surprised if he's lining up for Crystal Palace in 18 months' time. In terms of and then you've got the likes of McGrandle, so dependable, third spell at the club now. Looked really good actually in the 4 games that he played last season, but got injured unfortunately when we had that run. Jack Moylan, came in at the ground running, didn't he, with those 4 goals in 2 games against Barnsley and Cambridge. He's still young. He's really exciting, really raw. Probably would like to play him a little bit further up in a 10 if we can, alongside Tom Bayliss, who I'm actually really excited for. I know last year at Shrewsbury he didn't potentially pull up any trees, and he can be called lazy and whatever.
I personally think with Tom Bayliss, I think the quality of the coaching, especially with a full pre-season under Skubala, I think that's going to make a massive difference. Yeah. So he doesn't have momentum on his side, Tom Bayliss, I think it's fair to say, because it's since moving to Preston in, I want to say January 2020. I think that was when he moved. I'm not 100% on that, but about that, it didn't quite go to plan for Preston. Might have had injuries, might have been so many midfielders to compete with, and then he went to Shrewsbury, and stylistically you're playing in one of the weaker sides in the league and in a team under someone like Steve Cottrell, for instance, who isn't the most, you don't have really attacking wing backs, for instance, or a possession based style that's likely to get the best. And even then, actually, I think I have seen flashes from Tom Bayliss where you might have 2 or 3 times a game where he can get the ball between the lines, and then is just able to play that really incisive through ball and pick out someone. And I think that in a more progressive side that can progress the ball into that middle third at a higher volume, you might be able to bring more under maybe a different man management style as well. So you put all those things into the melting pot, plus the potential he showed as a youngster at Coventry City, and the versatility he showed as well, playing various different midfield roles under Mark Robins. Hopefully he can get his mojo back under Michael Skubala.
Yeah, I think so. And I take quite a lot of solace in the first season he had at Shrewsbury, that 22-23 campaign where he got 10 goal contributions. I thought, including a goal against us, actually, I thought he was excellent. And even going back to his Coventry days when they got promoted out of League Two, he scored and set up the other when we went to the Rico and won by 4-2. So clearly a talented individual. And like you say, I think playing in a team where I wouldn't say Shrewsbury were very restricted to attacking. They didn't it's almost like they didn't want to attack, but they weren't forward thinking. They weren't they weren't very creative. They didn't. I imagine I think they scored about 35 goals throughout the entirety of the campaign. That they're not a team that scored for fun.
They have players like Bennett at right wing back, who's like a solid defender, but like isn't necessarily going to fly forward and create space for your attacking midfield.
Yeah, I'd say Shrewsbury last year were quite industrious in terms of the players that they had. The likes, you look at that midfield of Taylor Perry, they had Noah Kenner as well. Wouldn't say they're players that want to go and get forward and score goals like Tom Bayliss does. And if he's got the protection behind him of Arahan or Hamilton and McGrandles and potentially Ocean Gallagher, if he can get a look in this year, then I think we're going to see the best of Tom Bayliss. And that's quite an exciting thought, because he's a real player with a good amount of caliber. So yeah, and then obviously you've got O'Sheen as well, who's coming back from Drogheda. I think I've spoke to you this time last year about Oshin being the one to watch from the academy. He's 17 or 18 now. He's a tall midfielder who's had some really successful loan spells. So he, like Hayden Can, he sort of followed him in terms of being at Peterborough Sports and then being at Drogheda. And he's had a much better sort of loan spells over the last 12 months. And he's one that we're really excited for. One that's definitely going to stay in the building this season, playing, your BSM trophies, playing your Carabao Cups, maybe come on for 5-10 minutes if we're winning a game, just to get him a little bit more experience. But he is one that the club are really excited for. They think that he's the one that they can also make quite a substantial fee on.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully he can get his opportunity. I wanted to, before looking at sort of the dynamic of the midfield, I wanted to get a steer from you on formation, because although it was wing-back systems for much of Skubala's time last season, from the way you've spoken, you're sort of not sure as to whether it's going to be a 3 at the back this season, or you think there's a possibility it might be a 4?
Clueless, Gab. Skubala, when he was at Leeds,
no change there.
No change. If you know me well, you know that's exactly right. So when he was at Leeds, whether this was dictated, because I know often when you play under 21s and 23s football, the method and the formation often is dictated by the first team manager in terms of wanting to play the same as the first team, so that when the players got called up into the first team, they knew the roles, they knew what they needed to do. When he was at Leeds, he played a 4-back, whether that was down to Jesse Marsh or whoever it was at the time. But like you say, last year, that run, we were so successful with 3 at the back. So I think it's really good to be able to play both. I think we probably will play both at some point. Thinking about when Mark Kennedy first came in, he wanted to play a 4, but reverted to a 3. I think we're going to see the opposite with Skubala. I think he's had to play a 3 because of what Mark Kennedy sort of left him. And I think in order to get that one more attacking body, I wouldn't be surprised to see us play a 4, so that we've got more, we can create more chaos in the final third, because that's what Skubala ball is. It's pure chaos in that final third. If we're able to get, an extra body in there, like a 10 or 2 wide players and a forward, then, as long as you, with your wing back, your fullbacks potentially looking to join in as well, then I think, we can create more chaos and potentially score more goals than we did last year, which would be some feat. But I've got no idea, Gab, because
well, Jake, I think I would guess, based on the number of players who are at a good stage of their careers and that you've got in midfield, who could play in midfield, I would be surprised if Michael Skubala isn't intending to use a formation that I think there'll be a minimum of 3 midfielders in the starting formation, because you're not assembling 6 central midfielders and you're only starting 2 of them in, I don't know, say a 3-4-3, because conversely, in terms of wide forwards, I suppose you've got Rico Hackett-Fairchild, who could play as a wide forward, or Dylan Duffy. But really, I think it's a squad that's suited to maximise the best of the midfield. So I'm thinking 3-5-2, 4-3-3, or 4-2-3-1.
Yeah, 4-2-3-1 would be the one where you've got a base, a double pivot of Arahan and Hamilton, or Hamilton and McGrandles if Arahan goes, or if we sell Arahan and we bring in another young midfielder, then we could probably bring about 10 exciting young midfielders for the fee that we're going to get for Ethan. And I think having that number 10 is going to be really pivotal, because you saw what it did really in that run at the end of the season, when Jack Moylan was able to step up and play into the 10. Danny Mandroya as well, and Ted Bishop were both more successful in the 10. Quickly talking about those two, they look, I guess they're not going to sign because they've not yet signed contract extensions. So it looks like they're both going to go as well. But you talk about the midfield depth there. You perhaps say that, do we really need added bodies in that midfield, because we look so stuck there at the moment?
Yeah, certainly do. The only hesitation I have about 4-2-3-1 rather than 4-3-3 or 3-5-2 is that I quite like that Ethan Arahan and Ethan the Ethan compound Neither of them you would necessarily pigeonhole them as anything. So Ethan Arahan, although he's probably more of a 6 than an 8, there are moments where he likes to really press forward, especially against the ball. And while Ethan Hamilton, you might say, is a bit more of an 8 than a 6, he does chip in defensively. And I think that flexibility probably lends itself to a quote-unquote flat 3-man midfield as opposed to 2 6s and 1 10.
Yeah, I can see that with perhaps putting a Bayliss in there or a Moylan to perhaps go and join the front three or the front two or whatever he decides to play. So, yeah, I think you're probably right with that.
Yeah, I think Moylan did quite well. I know you talked about Moylan in the 10 role, but I also quite liked him. I mean, even against Stevenage when he had to play there because of the injuries, I quite liked him driving forward, maybe from a deeper position.
Yeah. And it was that game against Barnsley where he played Arahan, and we had Mandroyu and Moylan as 8s really, because that's all we had. And Moylan scored twice that game and was fantastic. And well, hopefully he can take off like he did last year. But yeah, I agree. I think Moylan's strengths are when he's really good at close control dribbling, and then it's that he's really also good at that quick shift of movement to shift a defender and then hit the ball into the corner. I think you look at his goals, certainly against Cambridge, we're both sort of like that. So I would like the idea of Jack running from deep and scoring from range, because we've seen he can do it before.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, you play those 3 in midfield, then your backup options for if you needed to rotate, you got Tom Bayliss, Conor McGrandles, and Oisin Gallagher. So
just give us a title now, Gab. Hey? Might as well have it now, haven't we?
Absolutely. So left wing back, I think, is an interesting area. You've got Rico Hackett-Fairchild, who's a converted forward who's played at left wing back at times last season. You've also got Zach Bradshaw, who was out on loan last season, I think did quite well. But is there, if we're holding City to top 6 standards, do you think another left wing back is going to be required?
Yeah, I think so. And I can throw a potential name at you that I'm not 100% sure, but the club have said that they're close to agreeing a deal with a player that's been offered a contract at his club, but is under the age of 24. And I think, and I've not been told anything, because I wouldn't know, that player potentially could be Rio Adebisi at Crewe. I think he'd be a really good fit there. I've watched him I know I didn't watch him as extensively as you did in the playoff final, and then in the second leg away at Doncaster. I couldn't help but be really impressed with Adebisi. I think if we do move with this, I think he played on the left. His Crew played a back 4 last year, didn't they? I think if he played...
no, actually, I think they flipped. So they sometimes played with a back 4, but I reckon, off the top of my head, I think they quite often played with wing backs.
But if he could play wing back or play as a traditional fullback, then you've got the tactical flexibility to play. Or if you play as a wing back and you play Sean Rowan as left centre back, you can then perhaps, I don't know, use someone like Rico Hackett there, put Sean at left back, and then you've moved Rico Hackett further forward, which is probably where he would rather play than wing back. So, yeah, I imagine we'll be recruiting a left wing back or a left back at some stage. I don't know if it's Rio Adebisi. He's one that I would like, because I think he's got lots of good qualities. I think his stamina as well. I think perhaps his end quality isn't as good as it could be at the moment, but he's still under the age of 24. So one that we could develop for the future.
Sure. I think Adebisi has a lot of potential. I think he can be very dangerous going forward. And what was great about him last season was that he really improved his defensive game with the Alex. I will add a caveat, which is that while he was very highly rated by Crewe as a youngster coming through, he did have a couple of seasons where his progress stalled quite a bit. And actually, there's an argument that in 22-23, he looked a little bit like a defensive liability, some would have said. Now, all credit to him for improving the defensive side of his game and becoming a much more rounded left wing back. But I don't know that he has enough of a body of good work for me to be really confident that
Mm.
he's going to deliver for a side with top six, possibly even promotion aspirations for next season. So I'm a little bit on the fence about the Adebisi signing. I could understand the reasoning for it, but I'm also just a little bit wary of going too big on it because he's sort of shot up in the last 12 months.
Yeah.
But he's not necessarily got the biggest body of good work, which is a slight question mark for me.
Yeah, I think if we were to play him as a wing back where he can go and affect the game going forward, then I think there's more license for him to be covered defensively. So we'd have Sean Rowan, who is naturally a very good one-on-one defender.
True.
So that if Rio was, you might not even sign for us, you might go and sign somewhere else. But if he was halfway up the pitch and we got caught in transition, I would be more than confident if their right winger was running at Sean Rowan for him to be able to prevent that, because you've also then got to factor in that Ethan Ryan is very good at reading those interceptions as well, and he is predominantly left-sided, so he'll play on that in that triangle there. So I think you can kind of forgive perhaps have a more offensive left wing back when you know you've got those two covering, if that makes sense. So
no, that makes a lot of sense. No, I think that's a really compelling argument. So listen, hopefully Adebisi, if he does sign, we don't know at this stage. Hopefully he can make an impact. So the striker position, I really like Ben House. We know I'm a massive fan of, and the relationship he struck up with Joe Taylor last season was really impressive. Freddie Draper has a good physical profile as well, and so impressive after his loan at Warsaw. For me, Tyler Walker, you've got as well back from injury. For me, what the attack is missing is maybe a super quick striker who can finish. I think that's really what I'd like to see Lincoln City add, especially if you're planning to play two up top.
Joe Taylor? No, we're not going to get Joe Taylor back. I'll be very surprised if he's playing in League One at all next season. I agree, because you've got Ben House, who's a very good, who's a workman who presses and is relentless in the press, very good at out of possession, and I think you could potentially even look at dropping Ben House further back into a 10 role, because with the ball at his feet, I know we had this argument, we were talking about it a few years ago. Ben House is probably one of the most technical strikers, I thought, at the time, because he was very good with the ball at his feet. And when Appleton first brought him in from Eastleigh, he sort of made his debut as a number 8 in midfield, and he sort of moved up the pitch a bit like a rock climbing wall, Gab. And he's ended up at the top, and he's been fantastic. He's been amazing for Lincoln. And
I just hope that he doesn't end up in the stands next season.
Ben, get back. West Ham. Ben, turn around. We need you to score. Come on. I'm sure his compass mentis won't go over the advertising hoarding. Freddie Draper as well. I think Freddie's a different profile with centre forward. Like you say, physical. I think when he came back, I thought he looked really good, especially in the games at Reading. And I don't know if you've seen, Gab, that finish away at Cheltenham on the penultimate day of the season, where he takes it down and volleys it right into the corner.
Yes,
He's a natural finisher. And I also think Tyler Walker is a similar natural finisher. If you put Tyler Walker in front of goal with not a lot of time to think about it, I think he scores more often than he doesn't. The problem with Tyler is getting him on the pitch, and we saw that last season. And I'm now going to play the "you were right" card, Gab, because I was very excited this time last year, and you had your reservations about Tyler Walker. And he started off okay. He looked well. He was playing up front with Ben House in a 2, but he got that injury and didn't come back. I think it was at the end of September, so he's had quite a long layoff. A fit Tyler Walker can be very good and very effective as a potential a bench option. Whether he'll be happy with that, I don't actually know. But I think you have to ask questions regarding his injury record this season. And I think you're right. I think a number 9 to come in and stretch games. I think I've been saying this about England, in especially in the Euros. If we can get a striker like an Ollie Watkins who can come on, stretch the game, make the defenders turn the other way, open the space up for a Moylan, for a Bayliss, for a House, for a Draper, for a Rico Hackett, whoever it is, and Ethan Hamilton perhaps from range, then I think you've got a good combination of forwards there. Whether you play one up
Yeah.
front, whether you play two.
Yeah, I'm thinking a speedy forward who can play either as a partner for Ben House or as a wide forward. So if you want to play 4-3-3, you could have them maybe cutting inside from one of the wide positions. So
Any names
that's
for us, Gab?
not off the top of my head, no.
That's your homework. That's your homework. Find me a
Okay,
find me a name who can do that. I wouldn't be.
no
I'd be.
problem, Mr. Tong.
Well, thank. Oh, goodness me!
Yeah, that wouldn't.
It's getting hot in here, Gab.
I don't know what you from that.
Whether that be a permanent option or whether we look to loan again, like we did with Joe Taylor, I think you're probably more likely going to be able to find that sort of centre forward out of a Premier League or a Championship sort of club on loan rather than perhaps looking to buy one. Because off the top of my head, the lad that's gone to Peterborough from Harrogate would be that sort of player, that profile. Ado, I think he'd be the type of, in terms of his characteristics. He's quick, he can stretch a game, and also can finish when he's in those opportunities to do so. So whether we try and buy one from the lower leagues like we've done before with Ben House and Charlie Kendall or whatever, or we look to bring one in, because I don't think Jovan Makama is that type. I think he's similar to a Tyler Walker, to a Freddie Draper. I expect him to go out on loan this coming season. He really admirably stepped up last season, Gab, when we had no strikers. If you remember, after that Bristol Rovers away, we lined up with a front three of Alistair Smith, Rico Hackett, and Teddy Bishop, I think, or Danny Mandroyu. And we had no striker all the way until we brought Joe Taylor through the door in January.
Yeah.
So, I think Jovan, who stepped up then, and he's had some good moments this year. He scored away at Barnsley. I mean, albeit it was the 5th, he scored a really important winner against Leyton Orient in the 90th minute. Again, I think if we can send him on loan to a top-end national league like an Oldham, or perhaps someone that's going to be down the bottom end of the league too, maybe we can send him to Grimsby. That would be funny, wouldn't it?
Well, support the lower league clubs.
Do you know what I mean? You've got to support the little man, haven't you? No, I don't mean that, Grimsby fans. Yes, I do. Someone who probably need that profile of centre forward. I can't think of a team at the moment in time, but that need a young striker that's going to run, that's going to hold the ball up well. He's got to learn a little bit, I think, Jovan, before he comes in and makes an impact. But the club have got a couple of young attacking players coming through the academy that they're quite excited about as well. There's been a lad on the bench quite a few times. I'm desperately trying to remember his name. It begins with an O. I'm sure someone can try and find it for me.
I'll tell you what, you tell me about the other one and I'll look up the name of the...
Well, they've had Bailey Adamson. I'm not sure whether he's still at the club. He's had spells at Lincoln United, but I think it's like a Coro, Gab, is who I think it is.
Coro.
A Coro. He's had
Zayna Coro.
That's him. He's played in the youth team. I think he might have played. Yeah, Sam's got it there. Look, I think if you'd have played, I think he played in the youth team with Freddie Draper during the FA Cup youth run when we played Watford. So yeah, there's options, and but I think you're right. I think one more centre forward would be preferable if we can have one, please, Santa Claus.
Yeah, but I think. Oh, where you at with Dylan Duffy, by the way? Is he still?
I like Dylan. I think as a squad player, and he's still quite young. I think he's quite energetic. I think with Dylan, I think he would be better off playing in a front three rather or
yeah. That's what I was wondering. Is there if it's 3-5-2? Is there a formational challenge with Dylan Duffy?
Yeah, I think so. We recruited him to be a left-sided winger. I think if we at times I think we'll play a number of systems this year. I think when we play the 4-3-3, I think you may be looking at having Dylan on that left-hand side. Perhaps we look to experiment in some of those, Papa John's BSM games or something like that, where Dylan can play because attacking going forward, on that left hand side, he's actually very good.
Could he be converted into a wing back like Rico Hackett-Fairchild?
I think potentially, but then I think you're taking some of his qualities away from him in terms of he's a very good one-on-one dribbler. I think as a wing,
but then a bit like we've talked about with Rio Adebisi, if you got Sean Rowan, who's a very good one.
I completely agree. But yeah,
I think if 3-5-2 becomes the default starting formation, then I think it makes sense to try and convert Dylan Duffy into a super attacking wing back and see whether that works.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
or if we end up playing that the three behind a striker, or a front three, a flat front three, potentially look to play, because I think Rico would probably prefer to play on the right of a front three. You've then got maybe Dylan on the left of it, and then you've got a striker, maybe a focal point like a Ben House, like a Freddie Draper, to hold the ball up and bring those players in. Because I think Dylan, like Rico, is better off running towards the opponent's goal rather than looking back at his own.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm thinking, if you're going to flip between 3-5-2 and 4-3-3, you're going to need. So we know Sean Rowan can play left centre back or left back.
Yeah.
So that means that the left wing back will need to come into the front three.
Yeah.
And then the right centre back so then a right centre back who can also play at right back. So it's a couple of those things that no.
Aoma would have been a good one, Gab, wouldn't he?
No, sorry, a right wing back that can also play at right back. There we go. Yeah, Aoma.
But he's gone, so we have to move on.
He's gone. But yeah, versatility I think will be quite an important thing to recruit for for when you sign more players, because then you've got players who can cover multiple positions, and then that makes changing formation a bit easier. So if we ignore the depth and injuries and all that kind of thing, in terms of a best 11 that can finish in the top 6 this season, I'm going to look through it right now. I think Lucas Jensen is a top 6 goalkeeper.
Yeah.
I think Adam Jackson or Paudie O'Connor are capable of getting into your top 6 as long as they play one or the other. Yeah. Sean Rowan, I think, is good enough. I think the Ethan Compound are good enough.
Yeah.
Obviously. I think one of the other 4 midfielders aren't too far off, and I think you've got enough depth there that probably one of them is going to have a breakout season.
Yeah.
So then Ben House is definitely good enough. What are we saying on Freddie? Do you reckon Freddie Draper is?
I think Freddie with a full season, because you look at it in terms of what he scored. He scored 8 goals in 20 odd for Drogheda, and then went and scored 10 goals for Walsall in about 20 games as well. Yeah. So he could well be a 20 goal a season striker within our ranks. I think if he wasn't a Lincoln player, he'd be one that most League One clubs would be monitoring, I think.
Okay, that makes sense. So let me have a look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I've got kind of about 8 stars there where you've got players who are good enough.
Rico? What about Rico? Do you think Rico is good for a top 16?
Not quite for me. Not as a regular starter, personally.
I think I can completely understand if you're looking at that from his Pompey days, because there was, but I think there's a lot of difference in terms of playing for a Portsmouth and playing for a Lincoln in terms of the expectation. I think you've seen a lot of players go to clubs like Portsmouth or Sunderland or Derby and then go elsewhere and then really thrive. And I think Rico has done that quite significantly at Lincoln. So for me, I think Rico Hackett as a left wing back or potentially as a front right or left of a front three, I think he could potentially play a key role in the team looking to get into the top 6. But
yeah, I mean, as much as I'm holding you to top 6 standards, I also think I've got to be realistic about the fact that you're not recruiting to a top 6 budget, so you're relying on your ability to develop players who might be very close to that level. Like Freddie Draper is very close to that level. It's players who are sort of it's the players who are getting there, and it's gambling that a few of those are going to, like Jack Moylan, for example, getting there. Gamble. I think you've got to gamble that a few of those are going to sort of make that next step, because that's how you operate. So in terms of how many, you've got an idea of numbers, what you think you're going to need?
I think, well, I think we need a right wing back. I think we need a centre back, and I think we need a left back.
Okay.
I think we're stacked in midfield. I would perhaps, like you say, another striker. I think potentially as well a couple of wide forwards that can play that can play along the front three. I think maybe
Yeah.
one of those as well. So I think we're looking at maybe another 5. But I think well certainly know from the club talk that we had with Jez that they're probably going to look to do permanent deals more than loan deals. So I wouldn't be surprised if we were to start splashing a bit of money about it at trying to get up as well. I also think if Ethan goes and that becomes a big problem, I think we'd then have to go and
Yes, of course.
try and recruit another number 6 who we think could do.
Well, you've signed Conor McGrandles, though, Jake. Do you think that if Ethan went, it would just be a case of bringing Conor McGrandles into it?
I think what we'd maybe do is look to maybe perhaps use Conor there this year and then bring in another.
Oisin Gallagher's a 6 as well.
Yeah. Well, I think Oisin is probably more of an 8 than a 6.
Oh, is he more of an 8? Sorry,
so I think you can be forgiven because he's not had a lot of football in his young life. But yeah, I think if we sold Ethan, then you'd perhaps. But the thing is, if you sell Ethan, Gav, you then all of a sudden potentially got 2 million to play with, where you're like,
yes.
well, we can recruit a lot of good players.
And 2 million to Lincoln City is kind of like 10 million.
Oh, mate, yeah, fantastic. We've never sold a player for £1 million before, and then all of a sudden we've got Ethan Arara, and we're talking about multi-millions. I'm like, oh my god, what this amount of money is? We don't get that. We don't get paid that well around this part of the world, so we're a little bit like, wow, money. But yeah, I think 5 would be fair. Maybe 6 if you're looking to add a bit of depth. But we ideally want to be going off a squad of maybe 20.
Yeah. Do you know what though? It's about that balancing act of ambition and development, where you want to have a squad that you feel can, because the success of the club recently has made fans more ambitious, and you want to make sure that you've got a squad that can sort of satisfy fans and get them feeling like they can challenge. At the same time, it's still a developmental club, so you've got to also create some space for these up and coming players like your Jay Benz, for instance, to can sort of maybe shoot up and create those pathways. So I think it's a tough balancing act, but yeah, I think another 5 additions sounds about right. So where was I? Expectations for next season. Do you think it's fair to say top 6 is still a target rather than an expectation?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, covering the league in a lot of detail, and we'll come on to this later. I'm sure it's a lot stronger. The teams,
totally.
In terms of budget, in terms of the quality of the team coming up and down. Like I mentioned, you normally get one club coming down from the Championship in an absolute mess. I think Birmingham are in a good position to come back up, which you'll be delighted about. I think Huddersfield with the recruitment of Duff and things like that, and Sorensen, I think they're showing they're capable of doing it. And Rotherham, as much as I hate that little fat Scotsman, I'm very much looking forward to singing the song that we like singing about him on New Year's Day. I think he's a very good manager, and you've seen the players that Rotherham have brought in. It's going to be difficult with Wrexham, Stockport have made some very good additions as well. So, and then you've got the likes of Charlton who have still got Alfie May.
Yeah, do you know what? That's a really big point. Like the likes of Charlton, Wigan,
Reading, I think will improve.
Depending on their ownership, the teams coming up strengthen the league as well. So I think the league's going to get a lot stronger, and you still got Bolton still in there. You got Peterborough. Always under Darren Ferguson.
Yeah. You get top 6 this year, you're gonna have to have earned it. I think.
Yeah, totally. Because I think I look at the league a couple of years ago, and it was like a split league. You got 12 halves and 12 have-nots. This year, I think there's like 16 12s and 8 have-not. 16
12s.
16 12s. What am I talking about? Absolute gobbledygook. 16 halves and 8 have-nots, or 18 halves and 6 have-not.
I also think you're then looking at potentially Burton under the new investment. I wouldn't say they're perhaps going to challenge for the top 6, but I imagine they're going to be extremely competitive. Obviously, they've signed
They've already got like 11 additions.
And Danilo Orsi was amazing in the playoff final, and he's a very good player. Whether he can do it out of Crawley, it remains to be seen. But I like the look of their recruitment. But we said this, I think, 12 months ago, Gab, with Burton. Like the look of Burton's recruitment. They brought in Cole Stockton. They brought in a couple of really good names.
But I think this year it feels like they've got a real vision, like with the new people
with the ownership. I agree.
I
But
think they really need to do.
I think you're right. I think top six is not an expectation; it's more of a target. I think when you're Lincoln City in League One, it can only be a target. There's some big budgets in League One being thrown around this year. From what I could tell,
you could improve. Although I'm really optimistic and sort of excited for you this season, there's also a world where you improve exponentially and still finish 10th just because of where the league is. You know what I mean?
I completely agree. I think I would expect a top 10 finish, but be hopeful that we can be close to the play. Mate, if we're not, we got close to the playoffs last year. Whether we can do it again, I don't know, because the league's a lot stronger. But and I know you're going to ask me the reasons to be excited. I've watched one or two of these, Gab. Trust me. Or 25 or 26. I think one of the reasons will be Skubala, but we can come on to that.
Let's come on to that.
Oh, we're coming. Oh, now. I wanted you to ask the question. I want you to go.
Okay, all right. Jake, what are the reasons? What are the reasons to believe that Lincoln City can meet their ambitions this season?
There we go. God, you deserve an Oscar for that, Gab.
Thank you.
What are the reasons? Well, we have a very good young and up-and-coming squad, I think. The likes of Araha, and we've got depth in midfield, which we didn't have last year. We've probably got one of the better goalkeepers in Lucas Jensen. We actually have 3 centre-forwards on the books as well, which is not a very Lincoln City thing to do. I think in general, we have a very good, well-rounded squad, and I think knowing
three centre forwards, you had it Matt Reed, Matt Green, and Ollie Palmer in 17,
Ollie Palmer's a bit like one of those donkeys you find at Blackpool, Skegness Seaside, especially he was under Lincoln. Whether he is or now, he'll probably find this and tweet about it, and I'll get him bother. But I think we have a well-rounded squad. I think we've got a lot of depth in some areas, certainly at the top end of the pitch and in the middle, down the spine. I think we've got a really good core of young players. I think one of the caveat, the really big reasons, Gab, for you to be optimistic on Lincoln is the recruitment. I think Jez George gets it right more times than he doesn't, and knowing that we're shopping in markets that other clubs probably haven't tapped into yet, like your Scandinavia, like your Ireland. I think that's very exciting, and
value is worth so much. I think in terms of those gains on other clubs.
Exactly. I think Preston have done quite a bit of it, haven't they? They've shopped in Scandinavia. I think they've got a few, and Blackburn have done it as well. I think. So there's potential there for that market to sign a player for maybe 300 grand, and then all of a sudden 18 months later they're worth £3 million, like Ethan. I also think Skubala is probably the biggest reason for you to be optimistic about Lincoln. He took over a Mark Kennedy squad, and I don't think there's a player from when Michael came in that didn't significantly improve. I think he's able to improve players, whether that be young players. So I thought Sean Rowan came on no end under him at the really young end of that spectrum, and then you go to the other end where you've got Adam Jackson, and you've got Paul O'Connor's only 25, but he seems like an elder statesman in our team. He improved them as well exponentially. So his coaching abilities and his tactical flexibility and his chaos, I think that run at the end of the season is. I think if any team had that run at the end of the season and didn't get promoted, you'd be going, well, if they do that, if they can get that off next year, then wow. I think a full season under Skubala, a full pre-season under Skubala is going to do the club wonders. So lots of reasons to be optimistic, Gab. It's going well off the pitch. Obviously, we've spoke about Clive and Harvey and Liam Scully, and it's a really good project at the minute. And I think there's lots and lots of reasons to be optimistic that Lincoln can can potentially gatecrash that top 6 because we came so close to doing it last year. I think we could be even better than we were last year this year. So,
Jake, what are the reasons for doubt?
Now, I've been waiting for this. I think one of the reasons for doubt, Gab, like we mentioned, the league's stronger.
Yeah.
And I know you've heard this loads of times because I've heard it loads of times from your other guests. League One next year is hard. League One is going to be, we've mentioned all the clubs that are going to be up there. Birmingham, who have rumoredly got a £20 million budget. You've got Huddersfield, Bolton, Barnsley, who you've got Mad Andy Simcox there who's cheering them on from the crowd. Peterborough, whilst they're probably going to lose like Ronnie Edwards and players like that, but they're going to get money, and you'd probably want to give that money to Darragh McAntony over everybody else in League One because he gets it right. And the whole recruitment team, they get it right more often than they don't. So, yeah, I think that's one of the reasons to doubt it. The league will be stronger. Whether we can move up at the same pace as the league. There's also the caveat that we could lose our key players. So it's not certain that we've already lost Lass. We've already lost one of our really key cogs. We lose Jensen as well. If a club want to come in and pay a fee, we have a fee on his head that if a club wants to come in and pay, then we wouldn't stand in his way, which could happen. And the big one is losing Ethan because he's so important to the way that we play it. And whilst we'll get a big fee for him, it is very difficult to replace that sort of player. I think the one that's right in the middle, the one that dictates you, because you've got to try and find someone that can do something similar. So, I think those would be the reasons for doubt. There's lots of, like I say, there's lots of big budgets around. There's lots of bigger clubs in Lincoln and this thing. We probably have a mid-table budget if we're being honest. But losing key players would probably kill it. If we lost Lass, Ethan, and Lucas in one season, Gab, I don't know what I'd do. I think I'd just start crying. But fingers crossed we can keep a hold of both of them at least for another year or so. But
when's Ethan out of contract at 2025?
So the club have got Ethan Arahan's out of contract. So we have 2 years from now, so 2026.
Okay, that's good.
And we have a year's option in the club's favour. So it's essentially like saying he's on a 3-year contract. I think the club have.
So technically 2027.
So yeah, so we could keep hold of Ethan for another year if we wanted to, and potentially if he has an even better season, look to sell him for even more in the summer. So
that's good because then that means that it means that his value is not going to plummet too quickly. So actually, that puts you in a really strong negotiating position for Ethan Arahan as well, which I think definitely works in your favour. So who'd have thought that getting top talents tied down to long-term contracts would prove beneficial?
Okay, absolutely. Well, I know you were talking to Charlie earlier from Wigan. I know they've obviously done it with Asgard, Tickle, and Charlie Hughes as well. So if it's really important for clubs like us, especially who play young squads, that we tie them down to such contracts because it's so easy to be taken advantage of. And you look at all these young players moving on for peanuts. So it's really important, I think, for us to have Ethan on such a long deal. It gives us a lot of control. I also think just to talk about Ethan some more, because why not? He's a really switched on individual. I've spoke to his mum quite a few times outside the ground. He's not just going to leave because, let's say, I don't know, he's been EFL Hub linked him with a move to Derby this summer. I don't think it'd be a wise move for him to go to Derby. I think he could potentially look to do better than going to Derby County, a newly promoted team in the Championship. I think he probably knows that. I think he knows the next club I need to go to because I want to get to the Premier League. I need to go to a team that I know I'm going to go and play, and we're going to be successful. And I can either get promoted there, or I can go and make an impression there and go.
That's the thing, because if Ethan Arahan's going to stand out more if he's getting on the ball and having lots of touches and able to conduct play. But at Derby, especially as underdogs relative underdogs in it, they're a big club in the Championship. But
they're a massive club, Gab. They're huge.
They're a huge club, of course. But under Paul Warne, who likes quite direct football, and as a newly promoted side that is sort of looking to stabilise a little bit, there's the danger that if you went to Derby, the ball would be going over his head a lot,
Yeah.
and therefore he wouldn't be able to stand out in the way that he would be at Lincoln. So actually, maybe waiting another year is better, and then there's going to be top half Championship clubs queuing up.
I think Cov would be a great move for him.
Oh,
I just think him in that Cov midfield. They've got Ben Sheaf in there, haven't they, at the moment?
Oh, to be fair, if Cov lost Ben Sheaf to Ipswich,
well, if Cov want to pay the money, because they've got some money, haven't they, from selling Yokoro? So then hopefully, if they have a sell-on clause as well. But yeah, look, we're well protected, Gab. That's the most important thing.
That's the most important thing.
You know, he's not going to leave this summer without our valuation, which would be extremely high for him, is met. So I think we'll be happy either way.
Absolutely. Right. Too early for a prediction, obviously.
Of course. I've read the script.
You know what's coming. I feel like self-conscious now. I know that you know what I'm going to say. Too early for a prediction, obviously. But give me a number, Jake, between 1 and 10 to denote your level of optimism that your ambitions will be realised.
Well, nearly everyone said a 7, haven't they?
I know.
Apart from Charlie, who went 11.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'm going to go 8. I'm really excited for the season. Whether that's because we've had no football for so long and the Euros is boring the absolute pants off me because it's not the EFL. I'm really excited. We're a club moving in the right direction, both on and off the pitch. We've got some fantastic footballers, at the club at the moment. We're commercially growing. We're, and we're in a good league because 10 years ago we were in the National League, and to be in League One, not to sound like Matt Farley, but oh my God, we're in League One, if you know what I mean. So
you sounded really convincing. That actually.
Yeah, I know. If you'd have said that to me 10 years ago, you'd have said to me 10 years ago, Gab, Lincoln will be looking to have a considerable chance of getting in the League One top 6, I would have laughed at you. So just to be here, it's all well and good. So I'm going to go for an 8.
Go for an 8. There you go. Optimism, but it's a tough league next season, just to recap that. Listen, Jake, thanks so much for your insight. It's been great to get your thoughts on the Imps ahead of the 24-25 season that kicks off in a few weeks' time. Plenty of time to go, of course, between then, with lots to change in the transfer window. Thanks to you for watching at home. Get yourself subscribed to EFL Debate on YouTube and on Spotify. Drop us a comment as well to let me know how you think Lincoln City might fare in League One next season. Also, get yourself subscribed to That League One podcast. Got any special offers? What's the deal for subscribers?
T-Lop is changing next year. I can't give too much away because we've not done the official launch yet. Right. But there will be a podcast next year. So if you come and follow me or Nappers or Wardy or Tom on Fauna written all over it, you'll be up to date with the latest news. But there is a podcast next year.
Great stuff. Well, everyone go check that out and follow That League One podcast on Twitter for any updates. Thanks to you for watching at home. This has been the EFL Debate Lincoln City Summer Deep Dive. We'll see you again very soon.